I've got trouble with wind, Glyn.
With wind?
Yeah.
Have you seen the doctor?
Well, I'm not sure she'd be interested because it's blown the covers off my garden furniture. I found it halfway up the garden yesterday.
Oh no, that sort of wind.
But equally, you may hear some booms and rattles and windows and doors rattling, and that's not my wind either. That's the guns, but they're really going for it this morning. So if you hear those noises, you might have to edit them out, or we'll just leave them in.
Ah, we'll leave them in. That's part of Wiltshire, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So welcome to another Hidden Wiltshire podcast, where we talk about things in Wiltshire that are relatively hidden. My name is Glyn Coy, and I am the person behind Hidden Wiltshire who tries to go out and take the odd photograph and share it with the wider world. And with me, I also have
Paul Timlett, who paints with light.
Now, that's an interesting expression.
Beat that.
Very artistic.
Yeah.
Paints with light. I have to try that. I might nick it.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, so the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks since we were last here. There's a few things been going on in the background. Something about a racehorse trainer, I believe, Paul.
Yeah, well, it was... so I put on the Facebook site and on the website a little blog about the River Till. And as you know from the last podcast, Till's Head newsletter asked if they could reproduce that as well. And there's a racehorse trainer who lives in Orchiston, which is between Till's Head and Shrewton, and it's a small village, large hamlet, but it's got some great racehorse connections. And in fact, if anybody's old enough to remember Mick Shannon, the ex-Southampton and England footballer, Mick Shannon and his family that's where he's from, and they train racehorses up there. But one of the trainers, a chap called Jeremy Naylor, he contacted me after we posted that blog, and he said, because I mentioned that the River Till used to be known as Water Lake in Shrewton until, God, I can't remember now, sort of early 20th century maybe. But he reminded me, and as did another friend of mine, that there was actually a Water Lake Lane between Till's Head and Orchiston. And I should have known because there's a bloke who works at the reserve with me. He lives there. And Water Lake Lane is basically it's a water meadow. And at the moment, I mean, you can't even wade through it in wellies. It's far too deep. But Jeremy said that years ago, the grass, because it was the soil is very rich, and because of the flooding it gets, and this goes back to other sort of stories I related about the meadows between Shrewton and Winterbourne Stoke being flooded and the sluice gates there. But he said because of the flooding there and because of the soil, the grass was so rich, and they used to let it grow to about 6 to 8 feet high, and then they would cut it. I mean, this was going back, 100, 150 years, but it got so high, and then they would cut it with scythes, and it was just made incredibly rich, sort of, animal feed. So Jeremy said, if you get a chance to update the blog, you might want to throw that in, and I will do at some point, but I haven't yet. So there you go, a little known part of Wiltshire, and hidden from most passers-by. So interesting little fact.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because that's what I like about doing this, is that we do these things, we go and visit these places, we put this stuff out into the world, as it were, and we're able to go back and revisit and update when we find out little bits of extra information, or some person will approach us and say, well, you didn't talk about that, and it's just nice to be able to go back in and just add to the record.
Yeah, and it's really probably a timely sort of reminder to encourage people to contact us.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I can't remember how Jeremy reached us. I think probably through the website.
Yeah.
But do you want to remind people how to contact us?
Yes, you can contact us via the website. If you go to hiddenwiltshire.com, there's two ways that you can keep up to date with what's going on. One is you can subscribe to the website, and you'll get a nice little email every time we push out a new article or a new podcast, and you can reply to those emails, and that's one way of doing it. Or there is a contact page on the website as well, where you can fill in information, put in a question, and fire it across, and it comes into my email, so I can get back to you. Or we're on social media as well. Facebook, search for Hidden Wiltshire. There's a Hidden Wiltshire page, and there's a Hidden Wiltshire group, but you can contact us through the messenger feature on Facebook as well. So there's multiple different ways to get in touch.
And something that I'll spring it on you, but something we haven't sort of discussed, or maybe you thought about it, but it's only just occurred to me, is leaving reviews for the podcast, because I think you can do that on Apple, can't you?
You can, yes. We do have, actually, the number of people accessing this podcast through Apple is going up.
Yeah.
As more and more people are finding it. So yes, with Apple you can leave review. Either just click on the number of stars, and you can give us a 1-star or a 5-star, whichever you prefer. But you can leave comments as well.
No, you can only leave 5-star.
Only 5 stars.
None of the others work.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And actually, talking about revisiting subjects, a few weeks ago we talked about Bratton and Eddington. And that was actually quite a popular podcast. That's had an enormous number of people listening to it, which is really encouraging, obviously. But we talked about Luckham Springs, and we had a little conversation about the rights of way around there and the tension between, the facts that these rights of way are there, and that there's a landowner that is not happy about one of them going through his garden. But I got a bit of an update on that. So I got an email in my inbox from the West Wiltshire branch of the Ramblers Society about this, and it seems that there was an application from the landowner to divert the path that goes through his garden into the paddock that goes to the side of it, and that's where all the signage points you towards that route anyway at the moment. And it seems that the Ramblers have withdrawn their objection to that because two things have happened. One is Wiltshire Council have issued an order to divert the footpath, and that's the first step in the process of getting a change to the right of way. But secondly, the landowners offered up 2 new rights of way that go from the springs up onto the open access land above, so onto Luckham Bottom, Picket Hill side of things. So I think on balance, it seems to be a really good compromise all round to improve the whole access, maintain the landowner's privacy, and there'll be new, legal routes opening directly from the open access land around it down to the springs. So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds like a win-win. I mean, the landowner gets his privacy, and the public gets some great new rights of way. I mean, it sounds like a very fair outcome to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else have you been up to the last couple of weeks?
I had a couple of wanders. I went up to Tinhead, had a wander around up there, dodging the artillery bangs that were taking place, because there's been some fairly heavy artillery over on the other side of Salisbury Plain, which has been, I'm amazed to hear it over here in Trowbridge, because it's right over towards the Pewsey Vale that way. But goodness me, the windows rattle. But the other thing that happened is I had a little bit of an interaction with a gentleman called Simon Tesler, who was posting quite a lot of things about his home on the internet recently. He lives in an old medieval manor house called Southwick Court, which is...
He's not trying to sell you a car, is he, by any chance?
No, he's not. He's not Tesla. He's Tesla.
Oh, right. Okay.
So no, just a coincidence. But yeah, he lives in Southwick Court. I know about this property. Not many people do, because it's hidden away, but it's in the middle of some old water meadows and fields between Trowbridge and Southwick. And so it's an amazingly preserved place in the landscape, and it's got fascinating history. There's links to royalty. A previous Archbishop of Canterbury was born in the house. It was owned by the Long family, who were very acquisitive in the Trowbridge area all those years ago. They owned most of the manor houses, South Wraxall Manor, Rood Ashton Hall, very wealthy family. And that's incidentally why a lot of the pubs in this area are called the Long's Arms, named after the Long family.
Right.
But yeah, he wrote up an article for the website which was telling the history of this property, and it's fascinating. I'd urge everyone to go and read it. But he also was talking about the fact that the land around the property got separated from the house around 30 years ago. It used to be part of the larger estate, but part of the land that runs right on the edge of Trowbridge, right over there's a stream effectively that joins up with the River Biss further downstream, but it's like an old water meadow. But that land had been earmarked for building. So you can guess what's happened. A nice developer has come along and decided they want to put 180 houses on this field.
Oh, wow.
Right on the floodplain, with a road linking to the busy A361, which would just create a traffic black spot. So to my mind, I looked at it and thought it was completely nuts. But anyway, it's in consultation at the moment. So he's encouraging people to go over to the Wiltshire Council website, and if you're objecting to the building, you can write an objection. And many people have done that already. Now, I won't get into a discussion here about building on green spaces and Wiltshire Council's attitude to that, because that's off topic. But needless to say,
far
that's
too
a subject
political
in itself. Yes. But I'm just in favour of green spaces, protecting them as much as we can, because when they're gone, they're gone. And there are, in Trowbridge itself, there's a lot of brown space which still needs to be developed and built on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interest of balance, when you go on and comment, because you can comment about any planning application, you can also express support if you so desire. So.
Of course. It's not a one-way street on this podcast.
Absolutely.
This podcast has kind of taken a direction I didn't quite expect at the start, because the reality is you and I are not historians or archaeologists, far from it. We're actually photographers. So I always thought that this podcast would be more about photography, but for the first few ones we've been stumbling along through history, and I think it's because many of the places we've talked about, and this is the case wherever you go in Wiltshire, they're just full of history. The landscape is full of history, and it just deserves to be talked about.
Yeah, I just wonder where we went wrong. How did this turn into a history and archaeology podcast, of which we know nothing?
Maybe it's attractive to hear two old blokes bumbling along trying to make something interesting. And I can just imagine all these archaeologists sat at home listening to this going, no. Actually, on a non-archaeology history theme, did you read the other day that there's been a white-tailed eagle roosting at Longleat? And this isn't a joke. This is deadly serious. Because they've released some white-tailed eagles on the Isle of Wight to sort of hopefully reintroduce them to the south of the UK. I mean, you get them in Scotland, although very rarely. But I saw something on, must have been social media somewhere, where they've been seen. In fact, this white-tailed eagle has got a tracker, and there's a website, and you can track where this thing is, and it's been roosting at Longleat. And I'd seen a photograph on a Facebook group, which I don't know, somebody clearly tried to photograph it on their phone or something, but it was a pretty poor picture, which she admitted, he or she admitted, but it's very clearly a white-tailed eagle over Salisbury Plain. Which, God, I'd love to see that. Yeah, it's funny. I think I spotted that photograph actually. I remember seeing it and I remember being very confused when someone commented and said, "Oh, that's come up from the Isle of Wight," and I'm thinking, have I missed the memo in this? Because I didn't even know they were here.
Yeah, he's on the ferry. Came over on the ferry.
Yeah, that's a good reason to look up as well as down when you're walking in Wiltshire at the moment.
But that was the other thing that tickled me on social media as well. It's the sighting of a calf on Salisbury Plain, a black calf with pink spots. And I thought, it's some sort of genetic mutation, but it's actually Frankie who does the Farm from the Madding Cows Instagram feed, which is fantastic. Anybody who's on Instagram, I'd urge you to follow that. But they had a newborn calf, and the mother rejected the calf, And so in order to sort of keep an eye on this car from where it was and how it's doing, they painted pink spots on it. So this thing's, and it's over at East Hill Farm, which I know is over near where you do where you count sheep and fall asleep. So
Indeed, yeah.
so it's
Yeah, that's a fantastic Instagram feed, Far from the Madding Cow. She puts up quite a lot of videos of what's going on during the day, and
Yeah,
it's
it's brilliant.
fascinating to watch along. It's very good.
Anyway,
Okay, so anyway, we've got a core topic this week, which we promised would be about Castle Combe without being about Castle Combe, which sounds very mysterious. But actually, Castle Combe is a very famous place. We're not going to talk about the village itself because there's loads of information about that, and this is hidden Wiltshire. We're going to talk about the whole countryside around it, where you did a walk, didn't you, a year ago?
I did. My God, that was epic. So yeah, should we get on with that? Yeah, so when I was, as you know, I do a little bit of homework for these podcasts, and I yes, amazing that may seem. I appreciate that. But, I did that walk, that Castle Combe walk I posted the blog on the 26th of July 2020, and it's my age, I suppose, but my memory was quite fuzzy about it, so I had to reread my blog and correct one or two mistakes in there. But as I was sort of going through and doing a bit more research and a bit more preparation, I could have added a sort of subtitle to this, and what I've written down here is the story of the Bybrook. And Bybrook is a stream or a river that flows all through that part of the world, and it flows through Castle Combe itself. Or past the sort of the manor and the golf course. And when I was looking at the walk route, which you'll find on the blog, at the foot of it, there's a OS sort of map with the route on it, and I realised that the Bybrook was on probably half of the route, and at the time I just hadn't realised. And so yeah, as I'm sort of going through the different parts of the walk, and think that's the Bybrook, and the presence of that river explains an awful lot about how, you know, the humans have sort of interacted with the landscape there, and explains an awful lot of the settlements that are there now and were in the past.
Yeah, it's like an echo of the Deverells. The Deverells all followed the Wylye, the River Wylye, and here we're seeing another example of settlements building up around a water source.
Exactly. But so again, you know, I'd urge you to go to the website, and you can sort of follow along with the blog and the map, as I just mentioned. But I parked when I went over there. I think we were just out of the lockdown 1.0 sort of this time last year. I think we just come out of that, so it was one of my sort of first forays out into the countryside. So I parked up in the free car park north of the village centre, which was completely deserted apart from one other vehicle. And I think, as I said in the blog, I could have parked in the village probably, but you know, I don't like seeing that place cluttered up with vehicles, and that's why the car park's there. So I parked up there and sort of wandered down and towards Castle Combe, and just off to my right there was a little lane. I think it was called School Lane, if I remember rightly, and it leads up to what used to be called or what was Castle Combe School. And I was reading a little bit about the history of that, and it was pretty active in the. I think it was actually opened in the late 18th, early 19th century. And there's loads of I think what were called school logs, which you can find on the Wiltshire sort of history website. Anyway, it's fascinating reading. I mean, really detailed logs going back to 1920s and things, and what they did and how they spent their money. But it records the fact in 1923, and blimey, isn't this sort of an echo of what's happening now? In 1923, it was closed for a month due to an outbreak of scarlet fever. And then it sort of reopened, and then sadly it closed for good in 1998. But so I sort of headed up to there, and I'm not going to go through the sort of detailed twists and turns of the walk. You can do that by reading the blog. But just behind the school, and I think another feature of this blog was so many. Or not so many, but a number of historical features that are there, but I never actually saw. So not only are they hidden from most of the people in Wiltshire, they were hidden from me as I did the walk. But just behind the school, you've got there's a golf course, very fine-looking golf course, and sort of part of the course itself are these pillow mounds. And they've sort of landscaped the golf course around these burial mounds, and then just beyond that, you've got the castle, which was an Iron Age promontory fort, which later became a sort of Norman Motte and Bailey castle. But there are also Mesolithic and Neolithic finds there. So this is a site that goes back sort of to around, well, Mesolithic is roughly 9,000 to 5,000 BC. So, once again, people have been there really since the last ice age.
Yeah, and if you look on the map, you can see it's got springs marked on the edge of the golf course. So again, water source is just an attraction to
absolutely, and that's the Bye Brook that goes through that golf course there.
So does the Bye Brook originate from those springs? It must do.
No, I think possibly a little bit further up. I know it feeds into the River Avon, not the River Avon that runs through South Wiltshire, but the one to the west that runs over to sort of Bristol way, I think. I must admit I didn't look very closely about where it rises, but it must be quite near to there. But that Iron Age hill fort, I didn't actually go to it because what turned out to be a sort of epic walk. If I'd have gone there as well, I'd never have finished. I'd still be out there.
You'd still be there, wouldn't you?
Yeah. But as you mentioned, sort of going down into the golf course and the Bye Brook that runs through the golf course itself, and I'm not quite sure exactly where, but near there somewhere. Which again I didn't realise that apparently in they filmed part of the 1980s TV version of Robin Hood around there. And it was actually sort of one of the standing locations where they would keep returning to. So
I used to watch that.
Yeah, I did as well. So watch out. I can't remember who was in it now, but watch out for arrows. So I remember sort of going across the golf course, and you have to sort of cross a couple of fairways and heading to this sort of covered sort of path. I mean, it was. I just remember it being quite dark because a tree sort of right over it, and I also remember some very strange footprints down there, which I sort of did a double take, and I realised what it was. These. There was a fashion, I don't know if people still do it, but they wear these sort of training shoes which have got almost no sole, or they've got toes, a very, very thin sole.
Yes.
And it looked like somebody with very big feet had walked through there barefoot. I thought, blooming heck,
you found the Castle Combe version of Bigfoot.
Absolutely. What on earth is going on here? But I sort of this path heads to what's called Nettleton Mill House, where you do a sort of a bit of a wriggle around some houses. I mean, there's this tiny little hamlet, again tucked away. Never knew it was there. It's beautiful old houses there, and then it sort of heads off down the side of the Bye Brook through. Actually, is it the Bye Brook there? Might have been another little stream, but through what's called on the map Deverell's Plantation Ford. Now it's spelt differently to the Deverells that we were talking about the other week. This is Deverell's with an ELLS at the end. And so it's Deverell's Plantation, and at the end of this sort of plantation there was a beautiful spot where there was a ford and the river, and I think in the blog I described it as a pack horse bridge, an old stone bridge. It's not a pack horse bridge at all. It's more sort of pedestrian sort of bridge that goes over the ford, and it reminded me a little bit of the one at Kingston Deverell. Funnily enough, when I was sort of doing my homework yesterday, I came across somebody else who posted a walk which was very, very similar to the one I did, and I hadn't seen it before, and in fact they did it before me, so I haven't copied it, but they posted a photograph, and I think it was something to Brunel University Ramblers Society or something like that, and there's a whole group of these students standing on that bridge, but it is just a beautiful spot, and I took a photograph of it which you'll find on the blog. But from there, having sort of crossed this stone bridge, you kind of go up over what's an absolute classic sort of Wiltshire Holloway. So with sunken lane over the sort of tree arch, and as you sort of go up, you sort of look out across the landscape to something called I think it was Foss Farm. And Foss gives the game away. It was on the Foss, or just off the Foss Way, of course, an old Roman road, which runs sort of right through just to the west of Castle Combe. Which gives a clue to its Roman past.
Yeah, there's on the map there. There's quite a lot of Roman stuff going on, isn't there, in terms of some of the names of places and the site of a Roman villa and a Roman road. You can actually see on the map there the Foss Way actually cuts right through the landscape there, Bass Foss Farm.
Yeah.
In fact, you see it's a long straight road.
And in fact, again, at the time, I was sort of I've misled people, I think, in the blog, and certainly confused myself. As you come up this sort of Holloway and you reach the top, you get to a road where it was sort of, I think it was on the apex of a bend where I sort of turned left, and the other side of the road there's again another plantation of trees, which is spelt Pinetum, and I thought, well, that sounds very Roman, but it's I mean, maybe it's a Latin derivation, but it's actually pronounced Pinetum, which again sounds very Latin, which actually means a plantation of conifers, which were planted for ornamental or scientific purposes. And this sort of Pinetum, it sort of falls away down a deep combe, and this whole area is full of bottoms. Our favourite subject. All these combes, and there's this. I just remember this plantation falling away down to my right, and it was, you could have been, well, as you know, I spent a lot of time in France, and I could have been in the depths of Dordogne looking at this sort of landscape.
Yeah. And it's interesting because with that, you've just, in the course of this conversation, uncovered why Castle Combe is called Castle Combe, because there is a castle, or the remains of a castle.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of combes around there as well.
Yes, including a very interestingly named one, which we'll get to at the end if I remember.
So I'm just looking there on the map, though. It says below the Pinetum there's a site of a Roman villa.
Well, yeah, and again, I spent far longer than was healthy sort of trying to research this again yesterday. And so basically, you on this road with the Pinetum down to your right, you pass the entrance, a very grand entrance to a farm, which was I think it's called Shrub Farm, which again reminded me of a sort of French chateau. This long straight drive with an avenue of trees, and this beautiful looking house right at the end, although you could really only see the sort of front door. But just after Shrub Farm, on your right there's a stile, and this takes you on to what's called the Palladian Way, which I think if I remember rightly, runs into Bath. So you kind of you take a very sharp right and back down on yourself, and you descend diagonally across this hill through the Pinetum, and at the bottom, you sort of reach the bottom of the combe and then start to climb again. And I remember just off to my left, beyond a fence, very, very steep-sided little valley. Trees on, thick trees on both sides, and there were some trenches there. And I many years ago, I worked for a summer during my school holidays for an archaeologist in Sussex, and it looked like the sort of trenches that we used to dig and excavate. And I knew it wasn't where if you look on the map, there's a site of a Roman villa, but that's kind of further up the hill, and I wondered what this was. And it was only yesterday I realised that it was associated with, or I believe it's associated with, the bathhouse for the villa, which was just, I don't know, 100 metres or so, a little bit further up the hill from these little sort of slit trenches that I'd seen. And there's quite a lot on the internet about the bathhouse. In fact, there's more about the bathhouse than there is about the villa itself. And the villa is even further up the hill. But this is back to my point about all these places that were not only unseen to much of the population of Wiltshire, but also to me as I was walking along. I couldn't see the excavations for the bathhouse. I think it's probably been largely covered over, but apparently it's incredibly well preserved when they did excavate it, and you can see all the photographs online. If you just Google Truckle Barn bathhouse or Truckle Barn Roman villa.
Yeah, it's a real shame that some of these things aren't kept open. Like if you go up to somewhere like Northumberland, they've got a lot of these places that they've been uncovered, they've been preserved, and they're open to the public. But
yeah.
With a lot of this stuff that happens on private land, it gets filled back in again to protect it.
Yeah.
And there's often nothing to be seen other than the fact it's marked on the map.
Yeah.
But
that's exactly the case with Truckle Hill Roman villa. And as you said, you look on the OS map and it's clearly marked. It says site of Roman villa. But as you go up the hill and you sort of the path sort of zigzags, and I remember to my left there was I think there was a hawthorn hedge, if I remember rightly, and then pretty substantial barbed wire fence, and then some trees. And the Roman villa, or the site of the Roman villa, is beyond that in an open field. And it was only yesterday that I realised that it's the site of the Roman villa, and it was described as a typical sort of Roman yeoman's villa. So it was nothing terribly grand. It's not like the one at Brixton Deverill. But it was still 16 rooms, so a fair size. But it was excavated first in the sort of middle 19th century, and of course in the days when archaeology was far more destructive than it is now. So I don't know what sort of damage was caused to it then, but now it's a cultivated field. It's been completely ploughed over, and as I was told by a couple that I bumped into a little bit later on, there's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing to see. Because at one point I was thinking, shall I nip over this gate and go and have a look? And I'm glad I didn't, because it was very clearly private land, and there was barbed wire sort of all over the top of the gate. So I suspect a few people have tried, but there quite literally isn't absolutely nothing to see. It's a ploughed field, and you don't want to be walking on a farmer's cultivated land.
Yeah, you'll probably get approached by a guy with a shotgun if you go there.
Yeah, it's very likely. But eventually you sort of reach sort of this zigzag path, and you get to the top of the hill where there is I can't remember the name of it now, Truckle Hill Barn, that's right, which is a lovely looking house, and apparently some of the masonry from the villa, which was dug up in the fields beyond, is actually been incorporated into Truckle Hill Barn, which it's quite an old house, but it's not that old.
Yeah.
So from there, again, if you look at the blog on the website, the footpath actually crosses the garden of Truckle Hill Barn, which is I can feel his pain. You know, the residents there, people trolling across your garden. But
Yeah, another one of these rights of way.
yeah,
Through
I
someone's
know.
back garden. Oh my.
But you literally have to cross his garden. You go into the gate one end and come out the other, and then you sort of again you can follow the walk, but you eventually there's quite a long trudge along a metalled road, which wasn't a huge amount of fun. There's some reasonable views up there, but and then you cross some fields and you get to the village of, says he, looking at his notes, North Wraxall, where I eventually sort of ended up.
That's really interesting because I've been to South Wraxall, which is down near Bradford on Avon. I've gone walking around there. It's the opposite end of Wiltshire though, but I'd be interested. I don't know the answer, but I'd just be interested to see what the tie-up is between North and South Wraxall.
Well, South Wraxall must be south of North Wraxall, I'd imagine.
Well, it clearly is. But what's the connection? That's the connection. That's what I'm after.
But I sort of discovered. I was told about a local connection for me. So my good chum over the road, BBC reporter and local TV celebrity Paul Clifton, and Paul, if you just drop me the £5 for mentioning your name there, that would be much appreciated. And we don't take bitcoins, by the way. But his brother was I don't know if you call him a vicar or a curate or whatever, but apparently Paul was saying that he lived in Cologne and Corsham at various points during his career, and the church at North Wraxall came within his area. I guess he was the area manager or whatever you call it in vicar terms. It's
most vicars don't have the luxury of having a single church under their control these days. They have to multitask and have a few.
That's right. So that was interesting. I didn't know that at the time when I was there. And again, as I said in the blog, sadly, sort of COVID times, as you know, I normally sort of head for the church and like to go in and have a poke around, but it was closed, and but it was a nice.
Yeah, that was the first lockdown though, wasn't it? I've noticed lately that quite a lot of churches have found a way to stay open now, so you do find a lot of them inviting people in for a bit of quiet reflection. Yeah.
So again, good reason to go back. It's a lovely little village though, North Wraxall, and in fact the couple that I sort of mentioned earlier on who told me about the Roman villa, I met them a bit further on in the walk, and they lived in North Wraxall. But yeah, lovely spot, beautiful spot, some lovely houses there. So from North Wraxall, I sort of headed up to the main road, which I think is the A420 from Chippenham, heading towards sort of the north of Bath, whatever that is it the A46 that goes up from Bath to the M4. So I think the A420 sort of connects Chippenham with the A46. So you have to cross that road, which is it's not massively busy, but it's very fast. I mean, people travelling along there at crazy speeds.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful going across there. But I was heading towards what's known either as Berry Wood Camp or Berry Camp, which was another Iron Age hill fort, and that turned into, this is where it all went horribly wrong. That turned into a bit of a nightmare. So I looked on the map and I couldn't see a sort of public right of way up there, and basically as you cross over that A420, you descend quite steeply over some quite sort of stony, rocky terrain, so it was quite slippery. You descend deep into the combe there, where sort of river flows through it, and the hill fort was somewhere up on my right, up in the trees. You certainly can't see it, and I was sort of thinking, well, should I go and have a look? And it was back to Bigfoot again. There was all this sort of incredible rustling in the undergrowth, and to my right, and this guy sort of burst out of the undergrowth, and he'd been sort of, walking along the brook with his dog, and I said to him, is there a way up there? And he said yeah. He said, and he tried to sort of describe the route, and I said, but there's no public right of way. And he said, I know the guy that farms here, and he doesn't mind, the odd person going up there. Now, I don't think he would thank us if thousands of people sort of started to go up there, but you're not going to get thousands of people, because it was absolutely brutal getting up there. I mean, it took me, I think, to get up there and back over 2 hours.
Wow.
And it was like trying to get through thick jungle. I mean, I had to turn around and come back at one point.
So when you said there's no right of way, there isn't even a path by the sounds of it up there?
No, there was not. Well, eventually I found some sort of forest trails, but this guy sort of directed me through some undergrowth, and I could have done with a machete. And it was only later on I found out that apparently the Gurkhas use it for training.
I can just imagine getting their knives out and hacking through the undergrowth.
Absolutely. I mean, I got to a point where I just couldn't go any further. I just ground to a halt. So
Bury Camp up there, is that Iron Age?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's pretty big. It's like kind of nine hectares. And again, if you look on the map, it's a multi-valet one. So I think there's sort of two lots of earthworks, quite deep ditches, but you can't really see it because the ditches are, it's within the trees.
One for a drone, maybe, I think.
Yeah, well, funny you should say that, because the guy that we mentioned who does David Abrams, who's got that fantastic Instagram feed, I contacted him about this camp, and I said, have you photographed it with your drone? Do you know anything about it? And he said, I've never heard of it. So I think he was planning to sort of go back and put his drone up over there.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, on Twitter they have a hashtag called Hill Forts Wednesday, where every Wednesday people drop in information and photos of Iron Age hill forts the length and breadth of the country. I'm thinking of a project here.
Yeah.
We could get a feature on Hill Forts Wednesday with Bury Camp at some point.
Absolutely.
Although I must admit, I don't fancy the idea of hacking through the underground on hands and knees.
As I say, as I did have to go back to the bottom of the combe, the bottom of the bottom, that I descended, and I can't for the life of me. There was a bridge over the brook down there. Again, it's quite clear from the blog and the route map. But as you go sort of really equally steeply up the other side, I sort of went back to that sort of bridge and went up the other side, and I did find some sort of forest, very broad forest trails where people have been clearly sort of riding horses through. There's lots of sort of hoof marks. Yeah. And then I sort of descended from there sort of in the vague direction of where the hill fort was on the map. But I remember climbing up a very steep bank, which was, I mean, I was on my hands and knees trying and holding on to trees to sort of, and I used to do a lot of climbing when I was younger, and this was pretty hairy. So I would, you really don't want to be going up there, and in some ways I wish I hadn't. I did get up there. I did get to the top. I have posted a picture on the blog of the hill fort itself, and it was just a big grassy field. You could just about make out sort of the shape of sort of some sort of enclosure. And I think reading about the camp afterwards, it was I think it was probably more of an animal enclosure than a large settlement. But again, if I remember rightly, there's Mesolithic and Neolithic finds up there as well, so it predates the Iron Age. So from there, I sort of went back to the woods and sort of back to the route, having taken this enormous detour, and headed up. Eventually sort of broke out of the forest onto some sort of open pasture at the top, and on the map you'll see it marked. It just says training course, and there were indeed some people exercising horses up there. So it's quite a relief actually to get out of the thick, undergrowth in the the woodland, and get out into sort of open downland again. And from there, I sort of headed in the direction of what's called Cullen Down on the map, and sort of headed down sort of through there. I do remember finding some beautiful little hamlet, I guess it was, maybe only half a dozen houses, again tucked away, and I know this area reasonably well. Never knew these cottages were there. Just stunningly peaceful spot, and I got to, I remember it was a junction of some long distance footpaths, and in my notes I hadn't made a note of what it was called, but again it's on the blog, where there's like I think a 4-way sign, and there was one of these long distance footpaths sort of headed off to my right, if I remember, but I kind of headed off basically in the direction of Slaughterford. So that's where I was aiming for, was the village of Slaughterford, and that is on the Bye Brook. So this is where you sort of connect with the Bye Brook again, and clearly the people of people of Slaughterford, the Bye Brook was quite important, and there were a number of sort of sluices and weirs around there. And again, I had a sort of a rant about that on the blog, about the number of private notices. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other, don't play bagpipes. It was just, everything was forbidden. But I think it used to be a popular area for wild swimming, and the owners don't want people swimming in there. Yes,
people can get very protective of their stretch of river.
But there were two. There was. I came across the remains of a water wheel, from a mill, which was. It was. You could see the top of the wheel and some sort of brickworks and masonry, and that apparently was the remains of what's called the rag mill. And there's a little plaque by it, and that's where they processed, as the name suggests, cotton rags, which then went into Slaughterford, which you can see in the background, to another mill there, which is called Chaps Mill, where they made paper. And so, clearly heavy usage of the waters there of the Bye Brook.
Yeah, and that it sounds like a small industry's growing up there around the water, the usage of the water.
Yeah, and that theme continues. So do stop and have a look at Slaughterford. It's not a very big village, but I really liked it because it wasn't a sort of pretentious, second home village. I'm sure there are second homes there, but it seemed that there were actually people living there, and there's the church is goes back to I think it was 15th century, the original church, but a lot of it was destroyed by Cromwell's armies during the Civil War, and a lot of it was restored in Victorian times. But it's a really sort of like sturdy looking church. But from there I sort of headed really along the Bye Brook towards Ford, where
is there a Ford in Ford?
There is a Ford in Ford. If you look it up on the map,
or a car factory.
Yes, or a car factory. But more importantly, there was a pub.
Ah, there you go. One of the delights of village walking.
And it was open. So
even better.
Post lockdown, the first pub I'd been into, and I think by this time it was about 4:30 in the afternoon. I thought, well, there's no chance the pub's going to be open, because I was desperate for a drink then, and it was open. It was fantastic. I could have spent the rest of the day in there, but it was starting. Although it was July, it was starting to get a little bit murky. I thought I'd crack on. So from there, and by the way, as you follow the Bye Brook from Slaughterford, it tips you out on the road to, I think it's the road to Cullen, if I remember rightly, which was a nasty stretch of road. It's a lot of people use it as a cut through to get to and from work, and the traffic sort of whips around the bends pretty quick. And that was, even though it was only about a quarter of a mile, that was quite scary. So I was glad to get to the pub. But then from there I sort of crossed over the A420 and headed towards a place called Longdean. And again, Longdean's on the Bye Brook, and there were two more mills there. And again, there's the upper mill, which is at called Colham Mill, Colham, and that was a cotton mill apparently. And then the lower mill, which is at Longdean itself, and so I posted pictures of that on the blog. That was a paper mill. So again, that theme of sort of multiple use, and I wonder if what the connection would have been perhaps with the mills at Slaughterford. Again, a rag mill and a cotton mill and a paper mill down there. But that, again, you're sort of this is the part of the walk where you're into really deep combes, and it's just stunning countryside. I urge you to go and sort of explore that part of the world. Keep away from weekends. I met a couple of local people who said, on a hot sunny day in July, this would, on a weekend, this would be like a motorway, some of these paths. So if you can, go out of peak times. And I pretty much had the pace to myself. It was beautiful. But getting towards the end of the walk, I then sort of came back sort of on a path looking down to the combe on my left, where I could see Colham Mill, and I went through this place which it's on the map. It's called the Bottom of Jeremy's. Now, what on earth is all that about?
Well, that's taking bottoms to a different level.
It is. And who the hell was Jeremy? Or Jeremy's, because it's plural. There were two of them at least. But I've googled it, I've researched it. I can't find anything out about that, the derivation of that name.
I'm convinced that someone on the Ordnance Survey on the inside has a huge sense of humour and drops these little Easter eggs into the map.
Yeah.
A bit like that place Gobbledygook in Chitterham that's on the map, and we know it's not a place. It references a house.
Yeah, and Tiddlywink, which is over by
Tiddlywink. That is a real place.
It is.
Tiddlywink.
Yeah.
Bottom of Jeremy's. If anyone's listening and knows what the history of Bottom of Jeremy's is, just south of Castle Combe, do let us know, because we're intrigued.
Yeah. But that was sort of pretty much delivered me back into the top end of Castle Combe and the end of the walk.
Now, looking on the map and following this around, that's quite a long walk.
Yeah, I think, I ended up doing about 14 miles, but there were lots of ways you can shorten it. I think, the one I put on the map on the blog site is about 8 miles, and you can shorten it from there. There's lots of places you can vary the route.
Or you could even split it in two and do one circuit.
Yeah.
One day and another
absolutely.
day. But it just looks like a fascinating. The thing I like about it is the amount of variety, the history, the combes and the hillsides.
Yeah.
And it's not really an area, because I'm not from that part of Wiltshire, it's not an area that I've explored very much. So it just makes it really interesting. Don't just go to the village. Go for a walk.
Yeah, give the village a wide berth. It's not hidden, that's for sure.
No, it's not.
So that's pretty much brings us to the end of the walk. Again, I can thoroughly recommend it. It was a super walk. Maybe that was because it was post-lockdown, but it is a beautiful part of the world. So before we finish today, just to remind people of the very kind offer that we have from Lover Boots. They've given us podcast listeners a discount of 20%. So, and by the way, we're not sponsored by Lover. We don't receive anything from them. It's just a really nice company, and I have a pair of their boots. My wife has a pair of their boots, and we pay for with our own money. So there's nothing in this for us. But they have given us a discount. So if you go to Lover, which is spelled LOWA.co.uk, that's their website, and when you check out, if you put in the discount code HW20, HW for Hidden Wiltshire, and then 20, HW20, you'll get 20% off.
Fantastic. Where are we going to be in 2 weeks?
I think we're going to go to Pewsey Vale, aren't we? We're going to sort of go to the hills up that way, and we've done a few walks up there, so it's time we did one of those.
Yeah, I mean, the Pewsey Vale, that's several podcasts in itself, but yeah, we'll have a think about which part of the Pewsey Vale we'll cover, but that's what we've got to look forward to in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. And before we go, thanks again to Steve Dixon for more new music in today's episode, and there's a lot more to come from him. So
see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Bye for now.